Greetings, monkey brains.
Apollo Gios, what's up, dude? Unmute, bro.
Hello?
Hey, what's up?
Yeah. Just a very simple question. Who is Esau and who is Jacob and who are their descendants?
Well, Esau's descendants are the Moabites, and Jacob's descendants are the Israelites.
Okay. Are you familiar with the Jewish perspective on this?
I think that Jews argue that eventually Edom stands for Rome and the Roman people, right? And Christianity by extension.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think that? Why would they get that perspective, and then why do Christians have a different perspective?
Well, they get that perspective from rabbinical traditions, which obviously don't accept the New Testament, right? So they don't see Christ as the Messiah. So in their view, most of the prophecies that are in, the major and minor prophets have to be pretty much restricted to an immediate grammatical historical sense. But oddly enough, even in the messianic text that Jews accept, there's future predictions about what the Messiah will bring. So I would argue that they apply an inconsistent hermeneutic because they will spiritualize a lot of these texts to refer to God's enemies or the enemies of Israel, but yet they castigate like the Christian interpretation for, quote, spiritualizing or giving a Christological context when they do the very same thing. So the fourfold sense of exegesis, pardes, which is in the rabbinical tradition, the Christians do the same thing. So they will do the same type of spiritual exegesis, but then they'll say, Christianity is false because of all the spiritual exegesis, which is false. But they do the same type of exegesis.
Well, I'm just kind of asking because this seems to be a pretty important, pertinent question to, the overall faith. Who has the covenant? Who doesn't? Right? Who has all these things? And both in the Old and New Testament, you do see passages related to how Esau is hated by God and how he's not well looked upon, right?
Yeah, and so do you think that the seed of Abraham are people who are biological descent, or do you think that it's a faith that's had? I mean,
well, I mean, for example, you're talking about the Edomites, the Edom is one aspect of the descendants, but I don't know how they come up with how that has to do with Rome. Again, a lot of this is
right. So okay, so let me tell you how they do that. So the way that they come up with that is they go back to the table of nations and the genealogy charts, and they think they speculate about what people group went into what area, right? Like Put is the Egyptians, right? Javan.
Let's say from an Orthodox perspective, are those things real or are those things metaphorical?
I think that we should believe in a historical sense to the text of Genesis, but that doesn't mean that the rabbinical exegesis that there's no spiritual sense to these texts is true in the way that Jews do it. So, in other words, the speculation about the Table of Nations doesn't prove Judaism. Huh?
But how do you know they're wrong?
Well, because most of these prophecies find their fulfillment in what Christ did. So that would negate the rabbinical exegesis as a whole. So in other words, the messianic prophecies are the first proof I would go to. So in other words, let me be really clear, and I'll let you speak. I'm not saying that the Table of Nations is wrong. I'm saying that the way that they said that Edom is Rome is they'll say, like, the descendants of Japheth went in this region, and those people are the people that ended up being Rome and, Gentiles and Gentile Christianity, right? So that's what they'll say. I'm not saying that Genesis 10 and the Table of Nations is wrong and we should, quote, spiritualize it. By spiritualizing doesn't mean not historical. In our view, the historical is the basis for any spiritualizing or allegorizing or Christological, typological interpretations, right? So we're not disagreeing on hermeneutics, but we're disagreeing on the interpretation of the text. So the way to disprove those arguments is principally just the question of, did Christ fulfill the prophecies in the typology?
Right. So that's kind of the axiom on which you know what's right or wrong.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, just because it's just, me asking this, it seems like this type of question isn't asked all that much. I don't hear much about this because, when I look at it, it seems like this is pretty important, right? Who's on God's good side, I guess, right? If you want to look at it that way.
Sure.
So, knowing those things and knowing who goes where, I think is pretty important, right?
Absolutely right. And I mean, we look at Acts 15 where this question comes up about how should Gentile converts be received into the church. And the church decides in Acts 15 that God wouldn't require anything more than what was required of Noah. So Acts 15 actually looks back to the Noahic covenant to say that since Christianity is true Israelite worship for the nations, that's our view of it. We're going to bring the Gentile converts in on the basis of what was expected in the Noahic covenant.
But here's where it kind of gets a little fuzzy between what is the real kind of biological, you said, right? And then what's the spiritual? Because you're saying that, I just asking, so those who are Orthodox Christian are the descendants of Jacob. Is that what you're saying?
The faith of Jacob, by having the faith of Abraham, okay. Right? So
before being that, they were what? Descendants of?
Well, hold on. So even in the Old Testament period, even in the time of the law, the prophets, even from the Jewish perspective, those people are all converts. I mean, Abraham is a convert. So he's the father of the faithful, not because of anything biological. So he is a convert, and every Jew recognizes that, right?
I assume so, right? He went from idolatry to not, right?
Correct. And God called him out of Ur of Chaldea. So he was a Chaldean convert to the faith of the one true God. Likewise, we read of other people like Job, right, who had the faith, who were not of any biological descent. That was right. So the point is that God has accepted people prior to the Abrahamic covenant on the basis of their faith in God and living a holy life. So when the covenant was made with Abraham, just because there's a biological component to it, it doesn't mean that it never ceases, that it's always reduced to a biological component. So in other words, it's a both and, because people after Abraham converted during the Abrahamic and Mosaic covenant, there were people who converted to Judaism then, right? So when Christ comes,
both and, not either or.
Correct. So when Christ comes, he ends up being the whole meaning of that biological element from our perspective, right? So when Christ comes, the biological component to why Israel was so important is fulfilled. It's not destroyed, it's fulfilled. And even still, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying you're giving a good, I assume, Orthodox Christian perspective on this, but it's you can't not deny how the Jews have monopoly on this type of label. As in, if you go out and say, "Oh, Christians, this, the supersessionist." I'm not saying this is like right or wrong. I'm just saying from this perspective, this is very, highly looked upon in a good light. Right?
I'm not understanding what your question is, because even Paul argues that the Jews had all kinds of blessings, but that wasn't enough.
But I'm saying in modern times, I'm talking about rabbinical Judaism, how they say they are, the descendants of Jacob. Here's their, whatever, and we're Esau. That's what they say.
Okay, but so what?
That's perfectly fine for that to be said. That's perfectly fine for that to be whatever. But then, on the flip side, if a Christian says that, no, we're the real chosen and we have the faith, how far does that really get you?
I mean, you how far does it get me? Like, what is the pragmatic? How far?
You'd be banned. You'd be, you wouldn't have a YouTube channel. You wouldn't have any of these things if that was, like, let's say, something that was focused on and talked about to a high level, high degree.
I mean, I do streams all the time talking about the fulfillment of the messianic prophecies, the fulfillment of the symbolism of the temple.
That's all perfectly, allowed. But I'm talking about that particular question: who is chosen, who is not? if you know, this is this.
Okay, so hold on. Okay, so hold on. So what is the argument that you have? Because your bio says you're an anti-Abrahamic mindset, right?
Well, yeah, I think that if once we kind of start playing in these dialectical games, that's kind of seems, from my perspective, be already kind of pre-set up. Clearly, you're being willfully ignorant if you don't understand that this supersessionist. We know that the Vatican has completely disavowed this after Vatican II.
Yeah, I'm not a Roman Catholic. Not a Roman
I know
Catholic.
you're not Catholic, but I'm saying in mainstream Christianity, that's not a popular
Okay,
viewpoint.
do you have an argument against the Orthodox view, or do you have an argument at all? So I mean, I appreciate your questions, but I don't.
You're being fair. No, you're being fair with it. You know, saying that from an Orthodox perspective, this is how it is. But I'm just kind of looking at the totality of things, and the billions and billions of Christians that would say that what you're saying.
And there's not billions and billions of Christians.
Okay, you know what I'm saying. They would say that what you're saying is,
so
quote unquote.
What is it? That's a fallacy, right? That's a fallacy.
I guess so, but you're being honest. I'm just saying most Christians that you would come across would not be honest in that respect.
Okay, so again, how is that an argument at all about the truth or falsity of the Orthodox
what
Christianity?
you were going to respond to, so I was just asking that question.
Okay, but I just don't understand what your point is.
That they have a monopoly on, who gets to say what. And if you, as a Christian, come out, we have the chosen, spiritual, whatever, we're Jacobites, that would not be allowed, in any mainstream source. Like, where do you see the Pope saying that? Where do you see any of the...
But you keep bringing up the Pope. I mean, you keep bringing up the Pope. Well, how does that relate to what I'm talking about?
Well, I'm talking about how again, the totality of Christianity, there's more of those than there are of you.
So I don't think that's...
I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying...
Okay, but I don't think that's Christianity. So, in other words, the Orthodox paradigm is going to determine what counts as Christianity. So, I don't care what the Vatican does. Like, that doesn't have anything to do with what I believe or what we believe. And so, the fact that Vatican II and Nostra Aetate says that...
that's what you believed at one point, right? That's what I'm saying. It went from one thing to another.
When did it go from one thing to...
Catholics used to say that their faith is the paradigm.
I'm not a Roman Catholic. You're arguing against a Roman Catholic. I'm not a Roman Catholic. So what do you mean? What do you mean we said?
I don't see any.
What do you mean? You don't know what you're talking about. Again, that's not true. Where do we see what Orthodox council has ever said that Judaism is not superseded?
I don't know. I don't think there are many, because you're saying that
there aren't any.
That's fair. But I'm talking about what we see now in the totality of Christianity.
Okay, but I'm not part of the. You're calling it the totality of Christianity, and I'm saying that that's dependent upon one's.
No, but you're trying to give apologetics. You're trying to, come to Orthodoxy.
Am I giving apologetics for the Vatican?
No, but those who are Catholic, those who are evangelical,
So?
Protestant, whatever, when they're led to believe what they're led to believe, and they hear from you. I'm just saying this is not something that's talked about enough.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Right, but that doesn't have anything to do with whether it's true or false or what's true or false.
Well, I mean, apparently you're saying that you're determining that, or the Orthodox or whatever.
No, you're saying, look, listen, you don't understand the fallacy in this. You're saying that, well, they say you're wrong. So what? What does a million people saying that I'm wrong have to do with whether what I'm saying is true or false? It has nothing to do with it. I mean, we could have...
that's fair. You can still be correct in something and still be silenced, deplatformed. You're off the plantation.
Again, what is that?
I'm not saying that you're a coward. I'm not saying that you don't say this because you're afraid of something or whatever. But I'm just saying, I see most of mainstream Christianity deathly afraid of talking about this subject because it's so compromised.
Okay. Do you have a reason why Orthodox Christianity is not true?
Well, again, no, because what you're saying, it's either or. In this instance, right? You're either you're right or they're right. Well, again, no, because what you're saying, it's either or. In this instance, right? You're either you're right or they're right, and you're saying that you're right, and that's your, you can look at documents.
So you're an anti-Abrahamist, I guess. Are you a pagan?
No.
Okay. What is your position? What is your position?
It's not an either or, Jay. It's not either or. It's a both and. You can kind of look at things from an objective I think perspective, and just again, I'm looking at all sides.
I don't. You're talking ambiguities. I'm asking what is your position. It's not an either or to ask your position.
Well, my position is that again, mainstream Christianity does.
No,
have
your
a
position.
very,
What is your worldview? What's your position? Are you a pagan, an atheist, agnostic? What's your position that you're coming
I
from?
would say definitely looking at it from a spiritualist, maybe agnostic, but I'm open to hearing things. And what you're saying, I didn't know that it was that affirmative in orthodoxy, that there is this supersessionist, that this does continue, because, as a Westerner, from the Western point of view, you look at what this current culture says, and, again, I know you're not Catholic, but that's what I'm saying. Most people are, or most people are some type of evangelical.
But so what?
They see that.
Okay, that's a straw man. That's not my
Has
position.
an effect.
Okay, but okay. I mean, Seventh-day Adventists have a position. So what does that have to do with my position?
Well, clearly you explained your position, and that's kind of what my question was.
Okay. So anything else?
No, I mean, I think that, again, if you do want to continue this kind of pro-Orthodox thing, I think stuff like this needs to be more, talked about. But
okay, I mean, how much of my material have you watched?
I mean, you have tons and hours of content and stuff. Right. I know that. Yeah, if you talk about.
How many times do you think I've covered the 70 AD destruction of the temple, the continuity of the covenants, the Old Testament and the New Testament?
I did come across one thing you made. I can't remember who you were talking to specifically, but you did mention how the authority of the scribes, of the Jewish authorities, kind of transferred to the Christian authorities, right? Sometime between the destruction of the temple, and that's a pretty affirmative way of saying how
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that I've done, I don't know, probably 20 lectures in the last few years that deal with the Old Testament to New Testament, preterism, 70 AD, the apocalypse being fulfilled in the first century, covenant curses. I mean, probably 20 different talks that cover that.
So they're cursed?
Well, anybody is cursed who doesn't follow Christ, but
especially those who try to claim the covenant for themselves that they don't have.
Well, Paul says two things are true at the same time. If you read Romans 11, he says that on the one hand, Jews have a lot of blessings and that there is a predicted future conversion of the Jews, but he also says that the only way to be...
He also says that spirituality comes from them.
Yeah, he says that the only way to be in the covenant is in Christ. So it's a both and, not an either or.
Do you not see how maybe a Christian pastor, evangelical, would say, oh, no, this is why we have to support Zionism in Israel?
I mean, again, you're critiquing a position. You're laughing, or you're critiquing a position that no Orthodox person in the world holds to, and that I've critiqued and refuted. I have a whole chapter in my book on this.
That's fair, but where do they get their thing? Where does that come from?
Where does who?
That perspective, because they're reading the same text you're reading. They're reading that, and they think,
so?
That, okay, we have to be in the fold of Israel. We have to be in the fold of Jews.
I mean, that's just big. So anybody can read a text and come up with a wrong interpretation.
And so when that text was written, what was the hermeneutic for Christians at that time to use to view that text?
Which text?
When Paul talks about or writes about how spirituality comes from Jews.
Well, I don't know what you mean by, quote, spirituality. He says that the covenants and the prophets come from the Jews, right? But he says that those covenants and the prophets predicted the final covenant and the final prophet, Jesus himself. So it's kind of like having a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole puzzle. And the same thing would apply to any cult, right? Like cults might have some place for the Bible, but they're missing the other pieces, or they replace it with, their own cult leader, like Mormons or something like that. So in other words, what I'm saying is, I view, for me, from my perspective, I would say rabbinical Judaism, Mormonism, and Islam are all kind of similar in various ways in the way that they view the Bible and the way that they, there's a place for the Bible in various sections of it.
But it certainly is. Islam has complete, agreement with Judaism about, how Jesus is. Or, they call him Isa. Isa means Esau. So.
Oh, that's not what the Jews think. Rabbinical Judaism thinks that Jesus was a heretic. So that's not the Quran says that he is
I'm saying
a
that
prophet.
In Islam they call him Isa, Issa, right? And you can look at the Wikipedia, look at the etymology for what that term is, and
It's just the it's just the Arabic word for Messiah. That's all that means.
That's not completely agreed upon, but
Okay, well, it's the word for Jesus, Issa. That's the Arabic word for it. So
Isa. Some scholars claim that
okay,
that's
so
the
but what does that prove? So what?
well, from their perspective, he's the
Okay, so
Messiah for the nations. That's what
you seem to be arguing. Hold on. You seem to be arguing multiple things that because people have different perspectives, that there's no argument or you can't know what's true. That's a fallacy.
I'm not saying you can't know what's true, but I'm saying that you can look at these different perspectives and say that, or understand those perspectives and see what's going on in the world and be able to kind of connect the two and see, okay, this is where it's heading.
Well, you can't do that without the right paradigm. That's the point, though. So, yeah, you can make...
I understand, but there's things like the Abraham Accords. You've talked about these too, right? How there's going to be this whole Abraham, we're all going to hold hands together, all the Jews
Right.
and Muslims and Christians, right? And how that's totally,
Right.
a Zio Cook type of thing.
But again, what that's not my position. So you're arguing against a position that isn't my position.
Your position is trying to get Christians.
All right, this is getting
to
retarded.
Orthodox, when they see
This is
stuff like
retarded.
that.
Goodbye. I mean,